Joining us now, I'm delighted he's with us, Newt Gingrich, here on the Laura Ingraham Show, former Speaker of the House and informal advisor to President Trump. He joins us now. Newt, good to talk to you, sir. How are you?
It's good to be with you, and I think this has been an extraordinary period so far. I'm looking forward to tomorrow night and the joint session.
I am too. There are lots of sort of breaking news stories today. Number one, which we've hit on now for an hour plus, including with Sean Spicer earlier, is the stunning interview that George W. Bush had on the Today Show, where he leveled these veiled criticisms of Donald Trump and the travel ban. And we'll play a soundbite so you can listen.
You know, if the United States decides to pull out before free society emerges, it's going to be hard to defeat them. If that's the goal, to defeat ISIS, which I believe it should be, that we project strength.
No, keep it going, James. That's not all of it. He goes on to be asked about the travel ban, which was really the point of criticism, and he said when he was asked about this that, look.
I just want to make sure I understand. You for or against the ban? You're against the ban?
I am for an immigration policy that's welcoming and that upholds the law.
Well, that's a veiled criticism. Everybody's writing about it. What's your sense?
Well, I'm not quite sure why the former president decided to go out the day before the joint session speech. I mean, this is an important moment for President Trump. I think the most important moment since the inaugural address. So in that sense, I don't quite know what President George W. Bush is trying to accomplish. But I think people misunderstand the whole nature of what we're trying to achieve here. First of all, creating free societies is not something which the Bush administration succeeded at. It's not something which the Obama administration succeeded at. And it may not be within our power to do it. The level of change you're going to need in some of these countries to get to what we would think of as a truly free society is a multi-generational project. It's not a very brief project. And that's why I think there's a real challenge for us to think about this. What President Trump has said pretty clearly is he wants to defend American interest. Well, a long time ago, Thomas Jefferson sent the Marines to Tripoli when we were a very tiny country, and he did it in order to enforce American rights against the Barbary pirates. But he didn't say to them, why don't you stay and try to democratize Algeria? I mean, he said he understood the limits of American power when we were a much smaller country, and maybe we ought to have a little more realistic sense of what we're capable of achieving.
Well, he was asked by Matt Lauer about the media and Trump's adversarial relationship with the media, and the former President Bush said, power can be very addictive, and it can be very corrosive, and it's important for the media to call to account people who abuse their power. It's kind of hard to tell others to have an independent free press when we're not willing to have one ourselves, which is frankly much more clear in criticizing Trump than even his comments on the travel ban. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, well, I think that the establishment wing of the Republican Party has always wanted to be liked by the rest of the establishment. They value the New York Times. They value the Washington Post. They would like CBS News to be their friend. And if that means they have to give up conservatism, and that means they have to accept things that are really stupid, then they do so. And in fact, they think they're quite clever doing it. But the debate we're having right now is not about a free press versus not a free press. The debate we're having is about fake news. And the truth is, fake news exists. I've recently begun working on some papers about the idea of fake education as the base of fake news. And this is not a new idea. It's Ronald Reagan in his 1964 nationally televised speech for Goldwater, who says, it's not what liberals don't know that's a problem, it's what liberals know that isn't true. Well, I think it's time for those of us who believe, when I get told about the number of young people who are bullied by their professors and bullied by their high school teachers and in some cases bullied by elementary school teachers who are determined to impose on them falsehoods, I think we have an obligation to stand up and say that's just false. It's not debatable. Those are lies. When the New York Times runs a story about a 16-year-old event in which Donald Trump, as candidate, apparently harassed a woman, and then the woman stands up and you watch her live on television say, "That's totally untrue. I told the New York Times it was untrue." She said he was a total gentleman. Now, who do you want to believe? Let's talk about alternative facts. You want to believe the New York Times report about the woman that the woman herself is totally repudiating? You had the same thing last week with the FBI and Reince Priebus. For 3 days, CNN was on a froth about a totally false story. And I think this is the kind of thing we just... And by the way, the chairman of the Intelligence Committee in the House has said bluntly, publicly, this is a false story.
Devin Nunes. And now they're after Sean Spicer, Newt, because Axios today has it that Sean Spicer was the one who urged or requested that Mike Pompeo, director of the CIA, come out and disabuse the press of the notion that there was some grand conspiracy of campaign contacts with Russia, when in fact that wasn't true, and that they knew that it wasn't true. That and the Priebus thing in addition, and they're all going after Spicer for that. But I don't see what there's anything wrong with that. For them to say, "Look, you went on record you didn't use your name, but you guys have said that this is not true. Would you mind giving some more specificity to that?" I don't see the big deal in that story at all.
Well, but I think you have to understand, the elite media gets up every morning knowing that Trump is bad. Now they have to find a story that proves it. If they can't find a story that proves it, they have to make up a story that proves it. And in the worst case, they have to interview each other. So each of them becomes an unnamed senior advisor. This is a very incestuous press corps, dominated by very incestuous editors. They all go to cocktail parties to share with each other how much they loathe Donald J. Trump and how much they wish that Hillary Clinton was president, and that Trump is essentially surrounded by rubes, and by rubes they mean people who aren't them. I think that I was very surprised. I was looking back at some material from the 1980s, and I said almost precisely the same things about the press in the 1980s, because they were lying about Ronald Reagan, they were lying about the Sandinistas. Remember that the New York Times had these three great waves of total dishonesty. It was totally dishonest in the 1930s about Stalin. Its reporter in Moscow was just a complete liar, and Diana West has written a terrific book called American Betrayal, in which she outlines the degree to which the press corps in Moscow would get together to agree on the lies. And the New York Times would publish them routinely. They lied about Castro. They pretended Castro was this nice young democratic reformer when he had been a communist, was clearly a communist, and wondered why the Times didn't get it. But their award-winning reporter from Cuba misled the American people for 3 solid years. And then, of course, they were totally wrong in covering Trump as a candidate from day one. Now they're wrong about covering Trump and the administration. And Spicer has my sympathy. I think he may have the hardest job of any
White House counsel. White House counsel and Sean have the hardest jobs in this administration. Right. No doubt about it. Let's just, before we let you go, Newt, a couple of other issues. There's a lot of concern about Obamacare repeal and replace. There's looks like we're not getting perhaps they're not getting the push from the White House. Having Congress be more responsive on this. What's your sense here about how important it is that this health care be handled the right way and that he follow through on his promise and push Congress to do so?
Look, I think 3 key steps. One, they have to find a way to repeal it. I mean, they've committed to it. Their base is committed to it. It's one of the definitions of success. 2, they have to manage the repeal in such a way that they do not dislocate millions and millions of Americans, many of whom may be in the middle of treatments for various health problems. I mean, you cannot establish the Republican legacy of 15 or 20 million people wondering what's going to happen to them and being anxiety-ridden. So that's challenging. But 3, at one level, they ought to relax. This is an opening piece of a very long story. Our health system is totally screwed up. it is going to take a lot more fixing than just this first bill, and they don't have to get it all done in one bite.
Newt Gingrich, it's always great to check in on you. I'm glad you're back from Antarctica, that you weren't eaten by a penguin or anything. So
always great talking to you.
You take care.
And Antarctica was fun, and the penguins were nicer than the news media.
Oh, that's a great point. Say hi to Callista, and I want to hear more about Antarctica later. We'll take a break. Don't go away.